Every place on the map has a history that has changed its narrative over the years by the various kings and queens who have ruled the land. But, if you look closer, you can always find the true history hidden between the various narratives. Just hearing the name of a place can trigger many human emotions, sometimes a gentle smile, and sometimes even nightmares. All these emotions are linked to the history of the place and its modern-day narrative. A history involving incidents, war, tales, and urban legends. The people of Kasol belong to the Chaitra tribe and are called the Chaitris. Chaitra derives many meaning across various Indian culture, but for people of Kasol, Chaitra means a new beginning. The Chaitris can be identified by a unique vulture pendant that they carry on their neck. Chaitris follow many unique customs with these pendants, and are rumored to carry hypnotic powers. Apart from the depth of beauty and serenity offered by the small mountain village of Kasol, the town protects an age-old secret, known only to a few. There are strange happenings in the forest, beyond human imaginations, that has rattled many minds for centuries. The 106 acres of single-tree forest. The suicide forest of Kasol.
Anjana then walks up slowly towards the giant creature, lying lifelessly on the ground. She kneeled in front of it, ran her fingers over its head, and put her head close to its ear and said, "I am sorry. Do try and forgive me. I promise you that I will protect each one of your kind and will not let this happen again." She understood the importance of life, not just humans, even animals.
Listen carefully. We are inside the Kirganga forest range and very close to the 106 acres suicide forest. We will need to cut down at least 5 trees, pack and move from here within the next 5 hours. Do not cut anything towards the right-hand side, Naresh says, as he points his hand towards the 106 acres suicide forest. The worker's eyes followed Naresh's hand with fear. Yakshas are ghosts that lives in the wilderness, devouring the travelers and protecting the forest. It has been mentioned in many religious contexts: Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism. Well, that is creepy. I shall Google it out later, thanks to the internet. He reflects a smile. One more thing. What is this stone of death the secret people murmur about in the valley? Where can I find it?
It was pitch dark as he slightly moved away from the cart. It seemed like he was not scared and was eager to learn the secret of the 106 acres. It could be the effect of the magic tobacco that he had smoked that has given him the courage to walk up to the suicide forest. He stood there in the cold and started taking a leak, looking into the darkness of the suicide forest. He was within the suicide forest. Everything seemed to be quite normal. He realized it was more colder in the suicide forest. The sound of the breeze bracing the leaves were louder, and it was extremely dark. Yet, he did not feel anything unusual inside the suicide forest. It did not seem to be haunted, or, for that matter, it never even induced an eerie feel. He finished taking a leak and zipped his pants. He then decided to walk a little further into the forest, just as to be sure he was within the suicide forest, so that he had a better story to tell. He broke a small twig from the tree and scratched his back with it, as he was getting an itching sensation. There it was, so humbly resting on the ground, giving out the slightest hint of the world of myth around it, the big boulder lying there alone, the stone of death. He was suddenly surrounded by an army of shadows, standing tall and about 20 feet away from him. None of them seemed to have a proper head. Some were smashed, while the others were hanging. The worker stood there in shock, did not know how to react. That's when he came forward amidst the shadows, he who seemed like the leader of the army of dead. He did not have a head. He stood there facing the worker for a while, before he started running towards worker. The young worker was terrified. He did not know what was going on. He did not know what he saw, but he knew he did not want any part of it, and he decided to end his life. He smashed his head onto the stone of death with a couple of blows. He started to bleed profusely before he went crashing down on the ground. He laid there bleeding himself to death with a last thought on his head. Should have listened to the old man. Arjun looks up and he sees a pretty young girl, dusky, with long hair and a smile on her face. "I am sorry," she said as she walked past him. Arjun was awestruck. She caught his attention and took his emotions for a roller coaster ride for a moment. Arjun turns back to see where she was heading to. The visibility had dropped considerably as the rain had become stronger. She vanished amidst the thick mist. Where did she go? Was she a tourist? Was she alone? Was she a resident? He contemplated as he walked into the ATM and withdraws cash. So what is this mentalist course you are planning to do? What does a mentalist do? Dad, a mentalist is someone who reads people's mind by studying the body language, influencing and receiving the surrounding energy. It is a combination of science and a larger phenomenon of understanding human intuition.
Well, we all have noticed our parents' and grandparents' generation is very healthy. And the reason is fairly simple. The answer lies in their food habits. They consumed all the essential nutrients in their diet. Unlike us, we eat to fill the stomach, but they ate to stay healthy and live longer. So my dream is to create new food recipes, include them in the diet for a healthy future generation.
Do you agree that both a human heart and a dog heart has the same function? That is, pump blood to various parts of the body. Though it does the same function, it has a major difference. A human heart beats in the range of 60, 100 beats per minute, whereas a dog's heart beats 60, 160 BPM. He paused and continued. Likewise, human eyes are receptive to only what we call the visible light, the range of electromagnetic radiation from 0.4 to 0.7 microns. The radiation emitted by spirits falls outside this range, and dogs' eyes are receptive to even this range of radiation, so they can see even spirits.
I know I am not in an emotionally stable time and space in my life. I would need some time as well, but all I am saying is, I am loving this time and would look forward to the same in the near future. Ella quietly listens to Arjun. She slowly plucks a flower from the nearby plant and plays with it. She then sits upright and turns towards Arjun and says, I have been in this situation once before in life and had a terrible feeling on the other side. I don't wish to be going through the same thing again, Arjun. I have something to say and promise me you will not flip out, she says as she looks into Arjun's eyes. I won't, dear. You can tell me anything. Okay, I'm not beating around the bush. I am a transgender. I look like a girl and I have man's parts.
Arjun was perplexed too. He clearly saw Ayla was not listening to him and she was losing it. He decides to pick her up. He rushes towards Ella as she sat next to the stone of death and tried to look and behind Arjun. She then did the unexpected. She starts to bang her head onto the stone of death. It was a heavy blow. Blood started to appear from her forehead. She leaned to take another blow. Arjun catches her before that. He lifts and drags her away from the stone of death. He takes a look around to see any form of help or exit route. Scooby barks twice and started to run. It was hardly 50 meters to one side where the last pine tree was. He looks around to make sure it was the shortest distance out from the suicide forest. In first thoughts he thought, if he could take her outside the suicide forest, he could save her. He ran as quick as he could, dragging her by her shoulder, bearing almost the entire weight on him. He did not lose hope. She kept shouting, "It is coming to kill me, let me die." She was bleeding profusely. A vulture takes a steep dive from the sky and flies over a battlefield, with armies lined up on both sides ready for battle, followed by many wounded people, corpses piled up and being burnt, people suffering and vomiting. He wanted to stop, but decided against it, to see if he could get any clue. A king, ordering something to his army men, and finally the images start to blur out, and just before he opens his eyes, he sees an image the king holding something. The power of Persian black magic might be present even today as we speak. There must be something that might have been protecting this tribe for generations. He continued, "Look at this axe. This old axe. I am sure it has lived through generations. This tiny thing might have been used to chop the head of so many diseased. How many lives could this have taken? Don't you think even this could be cursed or haunted?" he says, as he picks the axe and raises it up close to his face. This is Maharaja's handwritten set of rules and regulation back in the late 18th century. It is mentioned in the document that it is indeed his handwriting. If you notice the marked letters and writing pattern, we could say he was a born leader and a very caring man. He was able to inspire, lead, and was a strategic thinker, though these are his defining characteristics. One characteristic that stood out more than any other was that he was a very secretive person by nature, or rather was undergoing a secretive mission while he wrote these documents. Well, yes, I believe it could be connected. I remember many of the discoveries by my father mentions a lot about how plants communicate with each other. He claimed that plants communicate through two medium, one airborne and other through the root network beneath the soil, while in airborne medium, these plants emits a toxic chemical composition, plumes. These plumes send signal to the nearby plants on the oncoming attack, and these plants are able to change the chemical composition that vends of the insects. After 5 hours trekking, they reached the suicide forest. The rain had continued since last night. All three promised to keep this adventure very secretive. This time they were equipped with enough food, water, and also other apparatus for preserving the samples of plants for testing in the lab later. They had to make best use of this trip, as the rain was expected to continue for a couple of days, and it will be impossible to reach the suicide forest due to landslides and slippery pathways. Yella intervenes. Yes, even plants can be carnivorous. These plants feed on small insects and butterflies. Look at this inverted bell-shaped part. She points a section on the phone and continued. The plants holds the pollen inside this inverted bell-shaped section. And insects needs to get inside this to fetch the pollen. As it reaches inside, the plant closes its petals and traps the insect inside. Lack of air kills the insect, and the plant then slowly feeds on the dead insect. These plants belong to the Nepenthaceae family, and are commonly found in Madagascar Islands. This is really interesting. I never knew there were carnivorous plants. In fact, in these last few days, I have learned a lot of fascinating things about plant kingdom. Anjana spoke yesterday about plants being able to communicate with each other is still hard to digest, he says as he looks towards Anjana. Yes, they are considered to be far more intelligent than humans, for a simple fact that they have survived in this world for far more years than we humans did. She paused and continued, whilst she placed careful steps ahead. The intelligence of various plant species are all around us, yet we hardly notice them. Anjana was amongst the tallest in the group, as she decided to reach out to cut one of the low-lying branches from the pine tree. Due to the heavy breeze, the sickle swayed in the air, and it was difficult to reach the twig. After trying for a couple of times, the sickle got untied from the stick and fell right next to Ela, missing her head by a thin margin. Ela quickly moved a few steps backward in reflex, pressing her arms against her chest in shock. She was startled and realized it was very thin margin. The sickle could have cut open her head, and with no way to get help at this point, she could have died too. I think our tiredness is showing off, guys. We need to take a small break, Anjana responds. I agree, Ela says as she walks a few steps towards the stone of death and sits on top of it, followed by Arjun and then Anjana. It was happening. Arjun looked towards Anjana. As he turned towards her, the wind started to make a howling sound, with the sound of the rain, and Scooby's bark made him even more frightened. Arjun quickly moved his head to spot Anjana with his torchlight. There she was. He took a sigh of relief. She was trying to pull out the wedge. She turned towards Arjun and signaled a thumbs up. But that's when Arjun realized it. He was in utter shock. He froze to his nerves. His face became pale as he slowly moved his head slightly above Anjana, and there he was, standing just behind Anjana, the headless axeman, a strongly built, over 6 feet tall figure, holding the axe on his one hand and staring at Anjana. Ella responds with a gentle smile and continued, "I think it is time we tell Mr. Balan too. Let us put an end to his suffering. I hope he will understand and forgive us. We will only know that tomorrow. Our faith and the fate of this world will be decided tomorrow." To know the secret of the 106 acres suicide forest, The Stone of Death and Headless Axeman, by en route Kasol today. To reach out to the author if you are interested in the script. Visit plotsformovies.com. Bring your book to life with sharing stories today. Give your book an AI-enabled promotion with sharingstories.in.